Hello everybody, welcome to the studio. Hopefully you're all having amazing creative days. And if you're looking for a video to teach you how to update the firmware on your Canon EOS R system camera, this is the video for you. So I'm going to show you two methods for updating the firmware on your camera. One will be the SD card method, and the second will be using the Canon Connects app to connect wirelessly to your camera and update the firmware. And for the demonstration in this video, I'm going to be using the new R5 Mark II because there's rumors of a new firmware for this camera coming out. With that being said though, the two methods I'm going to show you in this video will work on any one of the Canon EOS R system cameras. So if you're using an R7, an R50, an R100, an R5, even the old EOS R, one of these two methods will work for you. And if you enjoy this video, if you learned something new, definitely leave me a comment down below. Okay, now let me show you how to update your firmware using the Canon Camera Connect app. So first thing you got to do is go into your Apple Store or Play Store or whatever you use and download the app. Here it is right here. This is what it looks like. Go ahead and download that. And once you download that, you have to set up an account. So go ahead and set up your username and password and all that fun stuff. Okay, now click on this little icon in the top left corner, picture of a camera, so you can register your camera with this app. And then a drop-down menu appears, and go ahead and select the camera that you want to connect to the app. In my case, it's going to be the R5 Mark II. Next up, you have to connect your phone to the camera, so the app is going to ask you how you want to do that, either Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or USB. In my case, I'm trying Bluetooth, and make sure your camera connection settings are set appropriately. So make sure airplane mode is off. Make sure whatever settings you have to set up on your camera in order for the camera and the phone to connect are enabled. Here's a little menu that I ran into while trying to troubleshoot this. And all right, so having issues connecting the Bluetooth from my phone to my camera, not sure what's going on, but we're gonna move on to plan B, and we're gonna connect the phone to the camera via USB-C cable. So let's do that, and fingers crossed, hopefully it works. All right, USB seemed to work, so now we are connected to the camera. So now in the app, go to the top right corner, drop down the menu, and click on the button option that says Manage Registered Cameras. Now you're going to be taken to a screen that's going to give you some of your camera info, and it's going to tell you your current firmware version. Here you can see it's 100, and underneath there's a button that says Firmware Update. Click on that. When you click on the button, you're taken to another screen and it gives you some options. You can see firmware change list, notes, and download. So if you want to see what new items are added to your camera with the firmware or what fixes are made, you can check that out before you download the firmware. And of course, if you click the download button, you get to download the firmware after you agree to the terms of use. After you agree to the download, the firmware will be downloaded onto your phone. Once it's downloaded, click on the button that says Connect Camera, and then the app will upload the firmware onto the camera. So make sure that there's a memory card in your camera because it'll upload the firmware onto the memory card in your camera. And then after that, you'll have to do the update procedure through the camera menu settings. All right, one thing to keep in mind here is when the camera is in firmware update mode and the screen is gray, the touch screen functionality is turned off. So if you're touching your screen trying to hit OK and it doesn't work, don't get freaked out. Your camera's not broken. You just have to use the buttons on the camera to hit OK. So turn the scroll wheel, select OK, hit set, and you're good to go. Now all you have to do is sit back, relax, and wait for the firmware on your camera to update. It's about 5 minutes, give or take. Once the firmware is finished updating, hit OK and your camera will restart. And then just to be sure, go into your camera's menu settings in the yellow tab and double check to see that the new firmware is installed. All right, time for method number 2, updating the firmware using the SD card. So first thing we got to do is get the firmware off the Canon website. Go to usa.canon.com. I'll put that link down below in the description as well, so you can just click on the link and go there directly. So once you're there, click on Support, go to Find Software and Drivers, click on that. Scroll down, and we're looking for firmware for a camera, so we're going to click on the camera. If you're looking for firmware for a lens, click on the lens or any of these other products, but we're clicking on the camera. And it's going to ask you, what kind of camera. We're going to click on EOS digital cameras. So click on that. Now you're going to find your camera. So if you're shooting with, I don't know, whatever you see here in the list, click on your camera and download your firmware. We're using the EOS R5 Mark II. So we're going to click on this link. Click on software and drivers. Now come down here and select your operating system. I'm using Windows, but there's also Linux and Mac as well. And then you select your version. So there we go. Now we scroll down and here are the firmware updates. Every time there's a new firmware update, it'll be at the top of the list. Don't worry about downloading older firmwares, because if you download the newest firmware, it has all the oldest fixes or all the old firmware fixes in it as well. So just be careful that you download the right one. Here we have firmware 102 for Mac. I don't want that. I want 102 for Windows. So click on the I agree and click download, and there you go. All right, step number 2, format a memory card. So you can use a CF Express card if you want. I prefer an old SD card. So take the SD card, pop it into your camera, and format it in the camera. All right, so now let's get the firmware onto the memory card. Over here on the right, we have the memory card with the folders, the proprietary folders that are installed on your memory card when you format it in the camera. And here is the firmware in a zip file that we downloaded from the Canon website. Now, pay attention here because people make this mistake. They take the zip file and they drag and drop it onto the memory card, and then they wonder why when they put the memory card into their camera, there's no firmware on there, nothing works, and then they're like, oh, what's going on? So don't do that. First thing you have to do is extract the files from the zip file. All right, so right click on the zip file and click on extract all. It's a similar thing with Mac and Linux. So just extract, boom, click on that. It extracts all the files from within the zip file. And now, this is the folder that was inside the zip file. So what we're looking for here is that FIR file. Here's an instruction manual on how to install the firmware, but you have this video, so you don't really need that, but you can read it if you want. So the FIR file, that's what we want, and just drag and drop it onto the memory card. Don't put it in any subfolders or anything like that. Right in the root directory in the main folder. And there it is, FIR on the memory card. So now let's eject the memory card. Step number 4, take your memory card with the firmware on it and pop it into your camera and turn the camera on. Now here's a little pro tip for you. If we pop into the menu, you can see I don't really have access to many options. Now the reason why is because I am in automatic mode. If we switch to manual mode and hit menu again, you can see there's way more options here at the top. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that some cameras feature the firmware update option in the auto mode and some don't. So just to be safe, put your camera into manual mode. All right, last and final step, let's update the firmware. You can see here, firmware is already set to 102 because we did the update via the camera app. But we're going to do the update again via the SD card, and we're going to update the firmware, the same firmware over the old firmware. And I've done this before. It doesn't really harm the camera or change anything in any way. So let's just do it. Firmware update. And now the camera is going to ask you if you want to update the firmware on the camera or the lens. So if you happen to have the lens's firmware updated or put on the memory card, you can use that to update your lens. We're not doing that today. We're updating the camera. So select camera. Current firmware is 102. Would you like to update the firmware to 102? Yes. Okay. And now a loading screen will pop up. Now here's another note for you. Once the screen turns gray like this, all the touch functionality is gone. So if it asks you hit OK or select this and that, like right now if I touch the screen, nothing happens. So when the screen's gray, we're going to have to use the wheel over here to select different things. So yeah, we're going to update one firmware with the same firmware. And there we go. All right, there we go. Now hit OK, and the new firmware is installed. Now, if we go into the menu, I know it makes no difference because it was already 102, but there it is, 102. All right, so now you know how to update your firmware on your camera in 2 different ways, but the question is, which way is better? So for me personally, I'm gonna stick to the SD card method simply because it's simple. I go to the website, I download the firmware, put it on the card, put it on the camera, format the card, and I'm done. With the app, I mean, number one, you saw we had Bluetooth connectivity issues. The other thing too that I really don't like about the app is you have to register. So I have to set up an email account and a password with Canon. And I personally don't like that. You can disagree with me if you want, but in today's day and age, everyone can get hacked. Canon can get hacked, Sony can get hacked, PlayStation was hacked. You know, all these accounts you have everywhere can get hacked. And then these hackers sell your information to scammers, and then the scammers end up calling you and like, oh, you ordered a camera and it needs to be picked up. We're gonna need your credit card number, deposit, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there's scammers all over the place, and they can get a hold of your email. And that's my big concern, because I've had issues with junk mail. So I just don't want to set up these passwords. So after this video is done, I'm going to delete my account from Canon. I'm going to delete my email from Canon, delete the app, and done. I'm finished with that. So unless I absolutely need it for a project or something, I'll download it again. But I've been a photographer for 20 years. I use the app maybe 3 times. So yeah, I don't think I'll be using it. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion. If you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm sure other people in the community will also read the comments and we can all share ideas. And I mean, that's the whole point of all this, is sharing knowledge and sharing ideas. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on which way is better. All right, there you go. Now you know how to update the firmware on your Canon cameras, and you know 2 methods. So if you want to use the SD card or you want to use the camera app, there you go. And by the way, if you're into Canon cameras, camera lenses, reviews, tips and tricks videos, definitely subscribe to the channel, because I have a lot more content like that on the channel. And that is it for this video. Peace out. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.